It's my pleasure to be here today. So, being busy people that we are, let's cut the BS and talk about how to use authenticity to drive our customer experience. I will never forget my very first real marketing conference. I was so excited to see people in action, these famous speakers, authors. I'd read their books, I'd heard them on podcasts, I had subscribed to their newsletters. And there was one speaker in particular that I was extra excited to see, and they didn't disappoint. So I totally fangirled at the end of their speech. I waited in line, I had pictures taken, and then I was so excited that that exact same day, I went and bought a ticket for next year's conference because I knew that they would be back. After the conference, I connected with this person on social media, the way that we all do now. And over the next year, I commented on posts, I messaged back and forth with them, and I bought their books and I sent a book to the person to sign. They sent it back. I opened the book and they had drawn a picture of my dog from Instagram and put the hashtag, a very distinct hashtag, that I used to describe her. We really connected. I felt it. I was so excited. And then the next year at the conference, I could not wait to see them again. And again, they did not disappoint. They that notice all of the eyes here though. I was excited. I put myself out there. I believed in what I'd now describe as the authenticity of that person, but there was no me. And at the end of their speech, I waited in line at the end of the stage, and they greeted me with their stage smile and treated me just like everyone else. I wasn't special to this person. They didn't remember me. They certainly didn't remember looking me up enough to draw a picture of my dog in a book and send it to me. So I was crushed. I was utterly disappointed. I called my sister and my husband. I just really couldn't figure out how I'd been so tricked because they were why I came back to the conference. But everything I'd built up in my head felt like this lie now, and that they'd put on a show and I was the fool who believed it. My experience had been inconsistent, and it completely changed how I saw this person, their brand, and their products and services. They are a C-level executive at a well-known company. They're an author and obviously a speaker. And at this point in my head, they were fake. And that really sucked. And this idea of their authenticity had driven my actions and my interactions and my thoughts and feelings about them, and then ultimately about myself, because I literally bought into this person. And that probably sounds naive, but it wasn't my fault because I'd believed something to be true based on my experience up to that point. And when the man behind the curtain was revealed, the spell was broken. My experience is not unique, though. I'm sure everyone has a similar story where they thought a person or a company or even an opportunity was real when it wasn't, and it probably made you feel awful, maybe even angry. Based on what I knew, I felt disconnected from what I'd experienced for a whole year and then the follow up afterwards. And that's what made me dig into this idea of authenticity. Because too often we think about authenticity when there's a violation of it, but we're not necessarily focused on how to be intentional about creating authenticity. See, I don't think that this was the speaker's fault. And I didn't hold it against them because I know that they're busy. And the fact that those moments that they had with me for that whole year were special, while it hurt in the end, they weren't trying to trick me, but they also weren't being authentic all of the time across all of these touch points. So when we talk about authenticity, what do we mean? What do we think of? We think of something real, something original, something supported by unquestionable evidence, and something that's representative of one's true nature or beliefs. That's authentic. That's authenticity played out. It's a big word and it means a lot. But at the end of the day, it really means someone or something that we can trust. So why is it so important to the customer experience? Well, it's important because 86% of consumers say that it helps drive their purchase decisions. So if they find you authentic, they will buy in and probably from you. That's where they're going to spend their money. But on the other side, over half of consumers don't believe that brands are creating authentic content. And that's a big problem. The 2021 Edelman Trust Barometer shows us that trust in all information sources is at a record low. And in the era of fake news and misinformation, this drop has gone across the board, meaning the places that people typically go for answers, like search engines, traditional and social media, are no longer credible in the eyes of the public. But over the past decade, the trend line was pretty steady. And you just see this massive decline from 2020 to 2021. But not only are these media machines losing credibility, our expert humans are as well. We used to say, oh, ask an academic expert, or you can trust someone like yourself. You want to see someone buying a product or doing something that's like you. But even those have declined as well. They've all lost trust. And they had a less stable trend, but more so than this drop from last year to this year, this big shift. And there are several reasons for this. Pandemic, political environment. But what is this drop telling us? It's telling us that people are looking for something else. There's a dire need for people to see authenticity again. Consumers are more informed and more empowered than ever. So if you don't pass that authenticity sniff test, they'll know. And then they'll go and find a brand that does. The good news about authenticity, though, is that it's rare. So if you build an authentic brand, you'll have an advantage over your competition, which usually leads to increased revenue. Another great thing about authenticity is that it's free. You don't have to make room in your budget for it or increase your headcount. It is there for you to take and use right now. And who doesn't want a free tool to increase their revenue? So how does this affect your customer experience? How does authenticity affect it? Well, when executed properly, it builds that trust that we talked about. And that trust leads to credibility. And then you create genuine content that makes you relatable. And once you're relatable, you can connect. And that is the foundation to the ultimate goal, which is brand loyalty. Because your most loyal customers will do the heavy lifting for you. They'll do all that hard work. They'll go out to convince others to support your brand based on their positive word of mouth. Which means you have to be authentic across all touch points. Let's look at social media as a touch point, multiple touch points. And let's look at why consumers unfollow brands on social media. The two top reasons are that there's poor customer service and poor quality of a product or service, which means that a brand's product or service didn't do what it was supposed to do from a quality standpoint. And when customers had problems, that a brand did not handle them appropriately from the customer service side. And 45% unfollowed because of irrelevant content. So they were putting content out into the world that did not resonate with their audience. And then 39% over privacy concerns, that's a major trust issue. Brands did not build trust to let people know that they were not going to sell their information. And then you look at negative press. That has to do with values. Brands didn't uphold the values that were expected from the audience. This is a very telling story, but it's not just on the channels that you own or control. Customer experience is the sum of all the parts, every platform, every channel, every message, every time. Each and every touch point matters. And looking at the digital customer journey, it's important to note social media's role in customer experience. Though your audiences are differentiated by channel, the same rules apply. Any of the touch points that fail to meet expectations are cause for abandonment or an unfollow in this case. Because there are always alternatives if your brand can't fulfill your audience need, which isn't to say that you won't have an off day. Nothing is perfect. But if the sum of the parts is good and you follow the authenticity rules, your audience will understand and move on with you. While many brands have a love-hate relationship with social media, it is a critical metric for your brand. 58% of organizations can attribute social media to sales somehow, and 67% of organizations use social media to create long-term relationships. Beyond that, though, it provides detailed audience information, data beyond demographics. It extends reach, and it establishes benchmarks for you to compare. Love it or hate it, you need it. So unfollows matter. Because when you lose a follower, you're losing valuable data as well as an opportunity to build a relationship. If I were to ask you if you had an authentic brand, hopefully you would say yes. We know what authenticity is, and you might throw out some words like adding value, connecting, vulnerability, empathy, transparency, accountability, consistency. And some of these are elements of authenticity, but they do not equal authenticity, and they do not stand alone. And that's where some of these brands get it wrong. It sounds simple, but again, you're going back to that intentionality of what does it mean to be authentic? I want to talk about transparency first and foremost, because people equate transparency with authenticity, but they are not the same. Transparency is only one element of authenticity, and it's an important element, but it's how much you tell. Whereas transparency is how true it is. There's a big difference there. And customers love transparency. Absolutely love it. 66% say that it's the most attractive quality of a brand, and 44% say that it makes a brand best in class on social media. But it doesn't make that brand authentic. I love this quote. It's so true. With so many tools at our disposal, we can make our products and services better than they actually are. We can make them shinier, bigger, brighter. And it's tempting to add a feature to a product that may not perform quite as well as we say it does, or claim to be an expert in an area that we actually aren't. We see this in marketing all the time, don't we? Just because you run a successful TikTok channel, personally, it doesn't mean that you're a B2B social media expert. Remember, people know how to find out if you're not telling the whole truth. So, how do you actually check to make sure that your content is authentic? You conduct an authenticity audit. Before you put your content out into the world, you want to make sure it passes that authenticity smell test that I keep talking about. And each of these questions builds on the other. So let's get into each of them. The first question you want to ask is it true? And that sounds silly, but fake news. Can you back up what you're saying, content, with data? Did it come from a credible source? Are you using content from a current customer who gave you permission to use it? If you're looking for ways to increase your authenticity, Using user generated content, also known as UGC, is a great avenue because people trust people more than they trust brands. 75% of marketers will admit this. And as I mentioned, it has to be established. Trust has to be established before someone will buy from you, before they can move down that funnel. They have to know, like, and trust you. Trust is at the bottom. 81% of consumers said that they had to trust a brand before buying from them. That trust must be earned. Second, you want to ask yourself, will this benefit my audience? There doesn't always have to be a financial benefit associated with your content. It doesn't hurt. So let's say that you're creating a blog post, and the blog post is highlighting the convenience of a product or service for your audience. That piece, that blog post, would be providing emotional, physical, mental benefits to them by helping them save time, effort, and stress. Let's say you're putting on a webinar to show somebody how to DIY something instead of outsourcing it. That would be a financial benefit. But the point is that not all content is relevant to your audience. So if it doesn't provide some kind of real benefit, don't waste your time or theirs creating it. Can I fulfill my promise? All content has some promise associated with it, spoken or unspoken. Even something as simple like a hashtag motivational Monday quote. That is you promising that you believe in that quote. An ad listing the benefits of your product or service is you promising your product or service will provide those benefits. It's easy to fall into the trap of overpromising and underdelivering. Therefore, you must set realistic expectations. Don't claim to be a full service marketing agency if you're only really good at digital ads and SEO. And don't say your wrinkle cream can reduce wrinkles by 50% in 4 weeks if it doesn't. Your audience is relying on you to tell them the truth, and they want to see that truth in action. So don't talk about what you support, like a cause or a social policy, if you can't actually show it. You must walk your talk. Now, the next two questions go hand in hand. The first question is it sustainable? Meaning, can you keep your promise? We talked about fulfilling it, but can you keep it? Can you promise and keep up with that promise only once or ongoing? And if you can't keep up with it, it's not easy to maintain. Let's talk about customer service, the level of service. If you have only a few customers and you can handle all of their issues immediately, and then you scale, are you still able to keep that level of service when you get more clients? Is it sustainable? And these other pieces of sustainability are holding yourself accountable and showing up how you say you will. Make a commitment and see it through. But only make commitments that you can fully honor, because this is tied deeply to your integrity. The second question in here is it consistent? Sustainable and consistent are not the same. And consistency doesn't just apply to cadence. It also applies to your brand tone and voice. Do you sound universal across all platforms? Or are you passive on some channels and maybe pretty snarky on other channels? If somebody's following you on Twitter and Facebook, do they think that you're the same person or brand on both? Or would they think that you were two completely different people or two completely different brands? And looking back at that level of service that we talked about with sustainability, do you respond the same, either in the same time and in the same amount of time, or with the same quality on if somebody's reaching out with a message on Twitter versus Facebook? What does that consistency look like? And then your content is what's making you memorable. People remember consistent content. It's like a newsletter. If you love looking for a newsletter and it's a bi-weekly newsletter, every 2 weeks, And while this is cadence, you're relying on it and it's memorable because you know that it's good content. It resonates with you and you know you're going to get it every 2 weeks. It stays top of mind. The people in the brands that stand out the most are those that lied to you and those that made you feel special. People will remember an honest LinkedIn post about a professional challenge that you overcame that resonates with them much more than they'll remember a generic article about how to manage stress at work. Now, unfortunately, they'll also remember that time when your customer service team didn't solve their problem in a timely manner. But your customer is more likely to forgive this one negative experience if you own it, fix it, and if the sum of all the other experiences are good. Because consistent experiences are what build long-term relationships with your customers. And finally, it's imperative that you see your content from your audience's point of view. If your audience doesn't believe you, then nothing else matters. People go to great lengths to make sure that what they're buying, both figuratively and literally, is authentic. So brands should make it as easy as possible for them to verify that authenticity. Don't make them work for it. Put your credentials out there. This is where having an origin supported by unquestionable evidence comes into play. And we see this in wine. For example, winemakers were experiencing a lot of counterfeits in the market. So what they started doing was putting their logos on the cork. So when you opened your bottle of wine, you could look at the cork, it had the logo on it, you knew it was legit wine. Art is another area where people want the original. They want that genuine piece of art. There's tons of documentation that goes with original art and experts dedicated to this line of work. Diamonds. Diamonds are another common item that people want to ensure are real. And you can do at-home tests to check to see if your diamond's real with light and density. But like art, there's an entire industry around the authenticity of diamonds. So I want to go back now to my first marketing conference because I met another speaker there who was incredibly active on the conference Facebook page. And that's actually how we met. This person was answering everyone's question. I thought they were just an attendee. And I was a novice when it came to analytics. I was just getting into it. So I had tons of questions. And my questions were so basic. And I had so many that this person said, hey, let's meet up so I can show you so you'll remember it better. I'm a visual learner. I appreciated that. We met for 45 minutes. I had all my questions answered. I asked if I could buy them a coffee. They said, sure. I had no idea that I was getting a free analytics lesson from the best of the best. They didn't brag about their knowledge. They didn't ask me to pay them for those 45 minutes. And they didn't try to sell me anything after. They said, keep in touch. If you have more questions, let me know. Because of that experience, I would go and see them speak anytime I could. I bought all of their courses. I paid for some of their business services. I bought their books. I shared their content on social media. I recommended them to other companies. I joined their Slack channel. I subscribed to all of their newsletters, and I have taken all of their surveys and shared their surveys with others to help them collect more data. This person has helped me grow in my knowledge of analytics. They've extended my credentials, and they've helped me get new business. I've reached out to them personally and professionally for advice. And guess what? They reach back. They ask me how I'm doing. They make time for me when I need it. They refer me to other agencies. They share exclusive content with me. And they connect me to anyone they think that I can benefit from. They are genuinely a good person. And they're the quintessential example of authenticity every single time. We get together when we're in the same city. We do virtual happy hours. We text, we message on social media, we message on Slack, we email, and we share what's going on in our lives. And if you'll notice, this is a we relationship. It's not just an I relationship. Because this time I really did connect with someone, and it was authentic. Do you see the difference? Let's just go through this example and run them through an authenticity audit. So, is it true? Well, the information they gave me was initially and always has been true. So I would say yes. Will it benefit my audience? Their knowledge and connections and friendship have benefited me mentally, financially, emotionally, and physically from a stress point if I reach out to them panicked about something and they calm me down. Can I fulfill my promise? Each time I need something and they agree to help me, they always fulfill their promise. Always. Is it sustainable? Well, it's been going on for 4 years now. And whenever I reach out to them, they show up for me. I can rely on them. Is it consistent? They are who they say they are on all platforms, on all their channels, in person. And that's how we've built this long-term relationship. From the very first day that I met them, answering all those questions on the Facebook channel. They do that on all the channels where they're active. They do it on their personal pages. It's incredible. I mean, you see what you get and you get what you see. It's fantastic. And then would my audience describe it as authentic? Well, I'm a member of their audience and I'm using their brand as an example for authenticity. So I would say that they passed the smell test. Today we talked about authenticity, why it matters, how it affects the customer experience, and how you can make sure that you're creating and sharing authentic content every time. Just remember, transparency is how much you tell, and authenticity is how much of it is true. Thank you. I'd love to take any questions you might have.
Do have a couple questions from people. The examples you cited often were with social media and followers and about losing followers. How do you recommend someone tie the two together with stories on the website and brand and other things as opposed to just gaining or losing followers? And I think basically in context, the question is how much of this is a social media conversation versus the rest of the brand.
Oh, yeah. So when we talk about all touch points, it's anything. And when we talk about content, it is anything that someone has that they can attribute to your brand, whether it's a
Mhm.
comment from a person, whether it's your website or social media or a mention in the news. That is all content, and those are all touch points. And the ones that you control, specifically like the ones on your website, are very critical because that's you telling your own story.
Mhm.
So you can share, I mean, that's where some of the transparency comes in. You can share as much information as you're comfortable with, but you have to do it in a way that resonates. And I think where people get held up sometimes is they think that their audience is everyone. So you have to remember who your niche is, and you also have to be comfortable knowing that your authenticity is not going to resonate with everyone, and that's
Mhm.
okay. That's what will make you authentic. So on your website, you don't need to cater to everyone. You need to cater to who you are trying to cater to. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah. No, I'm sure it did for whoever asked. The next question I got was, it's funny. I like this quote. One man's trash is another man's treasure. I can understand the context here. How can you be authentic to all when it's hard to make everyone happy, let alone let alone one? And that's a great point because you've cited some great examples about how that made you happy, but it may not make somebody else.
Yeah, exactly. So, who is your audience? You have to keep that in mind. You will not please everyone. You're going to upset some people. And when you look at your audience, there's a majority there and you are catering to the majority. You want to, this is also where it comes to knowing your audience. I mean, there are lots of levels of marketing, and one of the foundational pieces is knowing who your audience is. So owning that piece, and like I just said, your brand of authenticity may not be for everyone, but that's
Mhm.
okay. That's what makes you extra authentic. Whether, and some people talk about stances, like taking political stances, and whether or not they should do that. If that's part of who you are, and if somebody were to find out later that that's who you are, and they felt like you hid that from them, that would feel very authentic, inauthentic to them. So it's kind of that same thing. You're never going to please everyone, correct? So you
Well,
just have to please the majority.
and that ties into this next question: how much is too much when it comes to being transparent? And when you think about cancel culture in particular, you can say the wrong thing quickly and find out about it quickly.
Yes. Or you can say the wrong thing and then they'll dig it up 20 years
Yes.
later. And
Or not say anything at all, and you still get in trouble.
yes, I mean, and that's the gamble, that's a risk that you take. And that's something from, that's something that's happening in our society right now. You just have to be careful and mindful. I mean, the the North remembers if you're Game of Thrones fans, but also the internet remembers. So anything
Right.
that you've ever said or done is out there. So you have to be comfortable with whatever you're sharing. If somebody digs this up in 20 years, should you have shared it? Would you regret that later? So it all comes down to who you are, how much you're willing to share. Now, some brands and some people personally are very private, and that's okay. And you can still be authentic and not share everything. People like to see how the sausage is made sometimes. So that's why they love seeing bloopers, behind the scenes things, and even sharing thoughts about struggles with stuff. As long as you're telling the truth, you can share as much as you want or as little as you
And winter is coming for us here in the state. So it's a really true. But this even goes back. I think this is uh, knowing what your authentic self is. When you think about what happened in 2020 with George Floyd, this was something that resonated throughout the world, and people that didn't know their stance in general were completely lost. People that did know their stance were still a little lost. And it came down to really trying to figure out what knowing what your authentic self would do, whether it's, you as a personal brand or as a professional brand. Got one more question.
want. Sure.
Uh, I like this one too. How do you come back from being perceived as inauthentic? Because that's going to happen to a lot of brands who are, I hate to using this word at this moment, that are waking or what woke to being authentic. A
Yeah.
lot of them haven't been that way, and it's hard for a lot of them to change the course of the Titanic, and all of a sudden end up trying to be authentic today when they haven't been for the last 10, 20 years.
Yeah. I mean, the first thing is owning it. It's part of service recovery. If you go back to customer service pieces, it's part of that service recovery. You have to own it. You have to hold yourself accountable and you have to say, hey, I messed up. And not everybody will believe you. But if you have a good track record, now for those people that have kind of always sucked and now they're trying to be authentic, that's harder. I would say therapy, and I would say I would say have a cameraman behind you all the time. Just kind of kidding. Uh, but
Yeah, good point.
if you mess up though, if you're a good person and you mess up once or twice, or you're having those off moments that we talked about, you just have to own it and you have to try to fix it. One thing that drives people nuts sometimes, I say people, it's really just me, is when people apologize in a fake way. They're not actually apologizing. They are basically saying, I'm sorry that I got found out. So you have to be
Yeah.
authentic in your apology. Like, hey, I shouldn't have said that, or I shouldn't have done that. And unfortunately, the media can spin things however they want. So if it's something that gets a lot of media attention, you just have to keep stating your truth. Because if you change your story, that's not authentic. And
Mhm.
if you're trying to continue living a lie of sorts, then somebody's going to find out because you can't maintain that. So it goes back to that sustainability piece, right? With authenticity. I mean, can you own it? Can you say, yeah, I messed up? And this is how I'm going to fix it, or this is how I'm going to try to fix it. And that's the best you can do. And then you have to
Yes.
actually do that. You say it and then you do it. They have to see that action with it as well. And it may take apologizing more than once and owning it more than once, and maybe making a bunch of public statements, and maybe possibly shifting what your content looks like moving forward. Could be a big eye opener and a big opportunity.
Agreed. So I appreciate you being this authentic with us for the last half hour or so. Donna, thank you very, very much. Again, if you want to get in touch with Donna, there's her info, and I want you to go out and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much.